Okay. Hello, Kris.
What's going on, Jacob?
Doing well. This is not an awkward introduction at all. Yeah, we're here with the CEO of Sendoso. Really happy to have you here, Kris. Um, I've had the pleasure of working with you for the past, I don't know, several months now, on the SDR automation front at Sendoso, and stoked to hear about your experience building the SDR team at Sendoso, and Sendoso in general, your philosophy on sales, and how you've seen the landscape evolve over the last few years since you started, and why you're kind of leading towards a more of a Clay-powered automated outbound motion today. But yeah, I would love to just kind of hear about how we met and start there.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick, I'll give a quick background on myself for those listeners who may not have done the research on me. So I'm Kris Rudeegraap. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sendoso. Sendoso is a direct mail and gifting platform helping mostly B2B companies build pipeline, drive revenue, retain customers by sending stuff, and mostly physical things, as well as e-gifts. Company started about 7 years ago. Before that, spent about a decade in software sales myself. So grew up in sales, then started a company selling kind of sales tech, MarTech. And for scale, we've raised about 150 million in funding, tens of thousands of users and customers, hundreds of millions spent through our platform. And so we've seen a lot and we've enabled a lot of teams in terms of how they go to market. And that's given us a lot of insights and given myself a lot of insights into how I think about building the best outbound motion. So to your question that I took a minute to answer on in terms of how we met. So I stumbled across Clay in some, I think it was some LinkedIn post, and I became obsessed with Clay as I really saw how the automations of Clay really played out. And so I met with the founder of Clay. I like meeting with founders, and then joined the user group for Clay. And then I asked their founder, like, who's the smartest person we can hire to help us at Sendoso scale out Clay? And voila, he referred me to you. So that was a really good referral from the
Yeah,
source.
I was super stoked when I got that referral.
Yeah.
I'm really, really grateful. I was like blown out of the water. And it's turned into an awesome relationship. And I appreciate all the advice you've given me on my business and Sendoso. It's been great. I was very, very lucky to meet you
Yeah, that's a great match.
for
Um,
sure.
Kris, like you've been in sales for such a long time, you're so familiar with the space. Like what was your experience scaling Sendoso's sales with SDRs, thinking about a world where you need less like human resources to scale your outbound, just like the status quo compared to where things are going today?
Yeah, so we originally ran the playbook that most SaaS companies did for the last couple decades, which was look at a spreadsheet, look at your revenue goals, look at your pipeline, look at your ACV, and then back into how many meetings you need, and then hire a ton of kind of more junior SDRs to book those meetings. And it was really a headcount game of you just need to hire. And we first started that in San Francisco, then really quickly realized that the costs for headcount there and the CAC was too high. So then we opened up an Arizona office. And then as COVID hit, we kind of went remote. That model works well and when there's infinite money available because you can just throw money at heads. And I say works well, it works okay. If you're not looking for profit and you're okay with kind of squinting your eyes at the inefficiencies in kind of human outbounding as your sole source for outbound meetings. And so I think that for a while now, I've thought that model was broken, but it wasn't really until the last couple years where market dynamics shifted. Companies really refocused their energy on efficiencies, on automations. The VC investment crunch and recession-ish time period really made a lot of companies, a lot of CROs, CMOs, a lot of executives rethink the model. And the humans were kind of the breaking point, which was where we needed to come up with what was our future strategy for outbounding with less of a reliance on infinite humans at a really high cost, low efficiency. And that's where Clay came in. That's where this concept or project name of SDB, Sales Development Bot, came in, which was a code name that we wanted to do for how we thought about kind of the future of everything was perfect. And that's really where we started to map out what this perfect world looked like with Jacob and team.
Right on. Um, I think that, one of the things that I find when I'm talking to a lot of sales leaders, CROs myself, is that like they're not really aware of what's possible with something like Clay. I remember you told me that you went to a conference, I think the Outreach conference or something like that, and you met the sales leader who was like, Outreach has, I don't know, sequences or something, and you're like, dude, like you don't know the half of what's possible with Clay. Could you maybe? I remember you had this huge document of all the different plays you wanted to run, and maybe I can even share what we're doing at Sendoso now if you're open to it, some of the different things, but. Maybe you could share what's possible with something like Clay. Like everyone, I think when they hear outbound automation, they think they know what they're talking about, like Apollo, Outreach.io, whatever. What are some
Yeah.
of the things you saw about Clay that really caught your eye and that you're able to do now that you couldn't before?
Yeah, so I think there's probably like 5 or 6 key areas that Clay unlocks, and also helps us redeploy SDRs. So I'm in this feeling that SDRs could just be more effective and used more wisely, and they're still much needed part of the process. We just need to reimagine the model of, and so I think the first one is around contact data enrichment. I think that is a huge win with Clay. For a while, actually, we relied on outsourced virtual assistants in India to augment that. So that was for like, I don't know,
Wow.
the last decade, kind of a hack in itself, which was, hey, let's contact data enrichment. That can be done through VAs. Next thing was signals and pulling in things like triggers, job changes, other news that is critical for writing personalized sequences, but something that was extremely hard to do without Clay. And again, would take each of these things that I'm outlining is like another 15 minutes or 10 minutes for an SDR to do. So the time efficiency is terrible. Like sure, an SDR could enrich some contact information, but doing searches and copying and pasting data, ineffective. Looking for signals can be done, but again, inefficient, ineffective. The next was really data syncs and data lookups. So checking to see, is this person already in Salesforce? When will we engage with them last? Are they a customer or not? And so again, that takes time, makes the human inefficient, something that Clay can do with, a couple steps. I think then goes into the personalization of the message itself, or the image that goes with the message, a landing page that goes along with that message. And so that personalization is, again, something that a human could do, take 15 minutes, but super inefficient and time consuming, and something that Clay can do very quickly with ChatGPT and taking into account signals and data syncs. So again, pulling all that together. The next one is really workflows. Then, adding them to the sequence and doing the follow-up. Again, something that Clay can do with a super fast automation, but takes humans effort. And then I think the last area there is now that you're doing outbound, now that you're getting some engagement with these prospects, they're starting to incur intent data. And so those human tasks, maybe a phone call or maybe some kind of secondary follow-up is critical to then prioritizing queue up, which can be done through automations with Clay as well, versus a human having to think about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What's been your process of like implementing this at Sendoso? Like shifting from the old super manual SDR inefficiency kind of model forward? Like how should teams do it? How have you done it? And what have you learned from that?
Yeah, so for us, there is a combination of things. One, it is kind of re-educating our sales development team on what's possible. I think there's a lot of blinders on sales development teams, revenue teams in terms of what's possible. So like what I just explained, most people are like, oh yeah, like that's something that a human has to do, or like you can't automate that, or sure, we could do like a bulk personalization message send once. But the reality is this is kind of an always on scenario with Clay that can continue just outbounding prospecting at scale. So first it was kind of change management, educating the teams on what's possible. Then it was prioritizing what were the plays or Clay tables we wanted to run first. And then there was a bit of working with Jacob and team on some of our ICP, the messaging, some of the stuff that we've done in the past in terms of how we want to craft our messages, what's the offers, And then it was really up to Jacob and team to do everything else, which was the contact and data enrichment, the signals, the data syncs, personalization, message writing, workflows, all that was done through them.
And we
And
were
then
able
our
to do some
team
pretty cool
now,
things.
yeah, and our team now focuses more on the warm replies and managing the inbox, or the warm intent signals and managing and reaching out to the warmest of prospects in a timely manner.
Yeah, we were posting a video soon and a post about some of the things we're doing for Sendoso, both with Clay, and I think actually the marketing team at Sendoso also wants to share with Sendoso customers how they could leverage Sendoso and Clay together to do the same thing. But one of the things we're able to do is figure out someone's interest based on their LinkedIn profile. We can enrich their LinkedIn profile with Clay, scrape it, and then use OpenAI like ChatGPT to figure out what they're interested in. And then we even came up with a unique gift idea for that person, personalized to their interest, and send it to them via email. And then you can send in the gift and track the pipeline, everything through Sendoso. So you can do some pretty, that's just one example, but some pretty wild things with Clay.
Yeah. And again, that's like something you can brainstorm once, takes a bit of upfront time, and then can be scaled out indefinitely versus like if that was a human doing that, it might take an hour per contact, per prospect to do all of the tasks. And then so they're only, barely scratching the surface in terms of what they're doing. And they're focusing their time on the wrong areas. They're focusing the time on these automatable tasks instead of selling or strong intent data.
Yeah. I think you kind of mentioned this before, but you mentioned that like all these really cool things that you can do with Clay, and you mentioned change management. And there's probably a rather long sales pitch as to why Clay is the right call for you just described the last 15 minutes. But in terms of breaking it down really simply, like what would you, to explain to someone like in one sentence, like how would you get someone to buy into Clay, like a CRO who has like 20 sales reps? They already have a humongous team. They already have so much invested. They already have an Indian, let's say outsourced VA agency overseas. They already have this motion. Like, and maybe it's also hard for them to even understand what Clay can do. That's one of the challenges of Clay is it is complex. That's why it's so powerful. I guess how would you explain it to them in a simple fashion that like would get them to understand why they should try it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the concept of how you outbound is pretty understandable and what like a perfect outbounding scenario is. And so I think showcasing the 5-10 steps that an SDR would run through, and then saying that can be done in 30 seconds versus 45 minutes. And so I think explaining that is critical, I think, to a CRO or a sales development leader. I think the second component of that, in what you asked about in terms of a large team that's already kind of set up for outbounding, either from an SDR perspective or an AE perspective, is everyone needs pipeline. If anyone you're talking to is someone that's, I can guarantee, is not drowning in pipeline with a million gazillion meetings. People need pipeline. It's harder than ever to get meetings, harder than ever to book deals and revenue. And so whether that's you need to augment AEs who are now more than ever having to do outbound and build their own kind of pipeline, which can be augmented through Clay, or whether you're looking at, hey, do we need to backfill these two SDRs that are underperformers, or should we just bring on Sculpted and leverage them in Clay? And so so I think it's whether you're backfilling, whether you're needing more pipeline, either of those, I think probably like 99% of the people you're talking to.
Fair enough. I have one more question for you. So
Sure.
you mentioned augmenting SDR teams and being more efficient. I think one of the things I've found when I'm talking to sales leaders, especially like sales development leaders that have a large team, they're worried about their SDRs and like how this will impact them. And are we all going to get fired? Like what's going to happen? I think everyone's in a sense sort of worried, like, is AI going to automate my job? I personally envision a world where this really helps people do things that they like SDRs, instead of them doing all this manual grunt work and really emotionally exhausting work, copy and pasting, going tab to tab, getting rejected over and over. Like it's really grunt work. I think this will help them a lot in terms of their ability to, instead of, like you said, doing all this manual work, they can just respond to leads and book calls and maybe do discovery calls. How do you see Clay actually helping SDRs today instead of hurting them?
Yeah, so one is automating those mundane tasks so that they can focus their time on prioritized selling, prioritized intent signals, There's only so many hours in the day. And so if they can spend those hours better, I think that that'll be critical and important. I think Clay also helps making sure things don't fall through the cracks. I know with a lot of these, every SDR or AE prospect dreams of this perfect scenario where they do the personalization, they do all the research, they do all this stuff, and they miss a step, or they I don't need to research this one. I'll just blast out an email because I don't have time. So it allows you to ensure kind of compliance in a sense that you're doing everything you should be doing and things aren't falling through the cracks. I think it also evolves the SDR role a bit too, and aligns more with potentially better orchestration with marketing, because again, it's a more repeatable process, and opens up probably paths for more upward career momentum too.
Nice. Mishti, anything from you?
Yeah.
I think I'm out of questions.
Yeah, I am curious about where we are going in terms of just not Clay, but just the broader space of these tools. Like, what isn't possible that you're excited to become possible? Or do you have ideas on things that like we're just on the frontier of and you think we'll see a lot more of? Because I feel like one interesting thing for us to think about also is just that like at some point everyone will be doing AI cold email, and like you're just going to have to always change. Like you can never stop changing your outreach and outbound strategy because the world is changing. And so, like, how do you think about like going ahead, what's coming next kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, throughout history, there's this sense of these different channels, these different strategies that could potentially get saturated. I think it's safe to say that like just, marketing automation emails, maybe were an example of something that got saturated. But what I think that's key about Clay is you're still focused on quality while also hitting on quantity. So you're not letting the personalization, you're doing more personalization. And ultimately, if you're doing the right homework to the right ICP, you're providing value. And so you're educating the market on the value your service provides. And so I think ultimately, this will be something that is probably more widely used. I could see a lot more people wanting to use Clay, but just, what is it, 10 years ago, no one even knew about sequencing. It was like you still had to write every email by itself. And so I think as things evolve, people will adapt to them and figure out what's the new channel or what's the new strategy.
Yeah. And then last thing, also just for people listening and wanting to kind of either maybe they're setting up a growth motion from scratch, maybe they already have a team, but what would your sort of ideal recommendation on like team setup be and different roles and who does what? You hinted at some of this before, but curious about the like bigger picture of the org.
Yeah, I think there's a future where there's a more focus on kind of this, I think it's under growth, but it's more of a savvy, more technical, more automation focused minded marketer or sales ops or operations person who's going to be able to help do a bit more than your basic like writing of emails or copying and pasting data. And I think some orgs are not set up for that. I think also it creates a great opportunity for an agency like Sculpted to come in and fill that gap and be able to come in, do a lot more of the technical or a lot more of the onus on using the newest tools and the newest technology so that the rest of the team can focus on what they know best, which is maybe the ICP, maybe it's the broader campaign marketing, maybe it's the sales process itself. So I think use the right tool for the right job when you can. And a lot of times bringing in agencies is the best solve for that.
Sweet. That's awesome. Yeah, thanks. It's really funny. It's almost like you're speaking the words out of my brain. It's kind of cool to hear them from someone else. But this is great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on and great chatting. And thank you.
Thank you, Kris. Solid.
Got it.